Hi, welcome to our channel of Ignouaudiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Engineering and Technology, SOET, Diploma, Postgraduate Diploma Programs, Diploma in Smart City Development and Management, DSCDM, IGNOU 001 Introduction to Smart Regions, Smart Cities and Smart Villages, Block-1 Introduction to Smart City, Unit-1 City Planning, History and Theory. 1.1 Introduction. Study of regional planning is gaining more and more prominence recently as this is the only solution to reduce regional disparities which are widely spread. In our country, the region as a unit for study and planning purpose should be widely used so that the nature, character and need of the area can be identified comprehensively and realistically. Both urban and rural settlements are integral part of regional planning because urban and settlements are planned at the local level whereas regions are planned at a meso scale, usually at the block or district level, constituting both urban and rural settlements. Simultaneously, study of historical background and evolution of urban settlements is important as well in order to know how they have attained the present development stage and what forces have been dominant in shaping their growth. It helps in character and need assessment of the urban centers. Therefore, in this unit the above-mentioned topics have been discussed. Objectives. After studying this unit, you should be able to understand the fundamental of some important concepts of regional planning and development. Describe concept of region. Appreciate urban and rural settlements, regional planning and development theories. Know about historical background of cities. 1.2 Concept of region and regional planning. 1.2.1 Concept of region and their delineations. The planning of regional development is focused with the region. In fact, this is where it all begins. Over the years, the notion of the area has been the topic of debate, with a fair amount of disagreement and divergence of view. It is very difficult to define a region because the concept has been used by different people to mean different things. To some, the region is a real object that can be positively classified as a natural region, whereas to others, it is only a work of fiction, a classification system. 1.2.1.1 Classification of the regions. There are three major classifications of regions, namely formal region, functional region and planning region. Formal region. The formal region is concerned with uniformity and defined according to homogeneity. A formal region is a geographical area which is homogeneous in terms of selected geographic criteria, e.g., topography or climate, or selected economic criteria, e.g., per capita income levels, or social and/or political criteria, e.g., party allegiance. The economic formal region, which is based on forms of industry and agriculture, is the other sort of formal region. More recently, economic formal regions have been defined based on characteristics such as income level, the unemployment rate, and rate of economic growth. Functional regions. Functional regions are also known as nodal or polarized regions. Ebenezer Howard was the first to propose the concept of a nodal region as a solution to the issues of a vast urban area. It emphasizes interdependence or linkage. It is composed of heterogeneous units such as cities, towns, and villages which are nevertheless functionally interrelated. The functional links are revealed in the form of towns, based on socio-economic parameters such as flow of commodities, people, services and shopping trips, etc. Patrick Geddes invented the term, city region, which has become the most often used nodal region word and emphasized the interconnection and interaction of factors in a region. Nodal areas have been identified using both deductive and inductive methods, whereas authors such as Dickinson, Green, and others attempted to discover the region by deductive procedures. Planning regions. The term, planning region, is defined in a variety of ways. Planning regions are geographical areas that are ideal for developing and implementing development plans to address regional issues. Definitions. It is defined by Budawal as areas that exhibit some coherence, unity, or economic decisions. According to Keeble, it is a large enough area to allow for significant changes in population and job distribution within its bounds. It should, however, be small enough to be regarded as a whole when it comes to planning issues. Claassen defined planning region as it must be large enough to make large-scale investment decisions, be able to offer essential labor to its own sector, have a homogeneous economic structure, have at least one growth point, and have a common approach to its challenges. Friedman's classification of planning zones, or development regions, Ashe referred to them. He classified the planning zones as follows. 1. Core regions. 2. Upward transitional areas. 3. Downward transitional areas. 4. Resource frontier regions, and 5. Specific problem regions. 1.2.1.2 Delineation of regions. Formal region. A. Based upon single feature. This is the simplest one wherein just a single homogeneous physical, social and economic parameter or feature is taken to delineate any formal region, e.g. linguistic region etc. B. Based upon multiple feature. We can delineate regions by taking into account more than one feature as well. Following methods can be followed in this case. 1. The fixed index method. 2. The variable index method. 3. The cluster method. Delineation of formal regions on the basis of homogeneity considerations. Taking either simple or composite features is undoubtedly a useful method in regional planning. It becomes necessary in those cases where regional differentials are important in planning policies. Nodal region. In the delineation of a nodal region, the interdependence between diverse formal areas or localities is ascertained for one or more selected phenomena of spatial flows. Multiple parameters and criteria such as unemployment rates, activity rates, and migration trends, as well as flows such as journeys to work and service flows, can be used to establish formal and functional regions. Such areas rarely overlap neatly, instead, they frequently differ significantly. While delineating planning regions, it becomes necessary to strike a balance between the considerations of homogeneity, nodality and administrative convenience. Therefore, compromise is generally required when identifying and delineating satisfactory planning regions. The techniques usually employed in actual delineation of functional regions are following. 1. The flow analysis. The flow analysis technique uses the empirical data of spatial flows to delineate the functional region. The spatial flows can include spatial flow data such as telephone densities, newspaper circulation area, commodity flows, commuting patterns etc. The boundary of area of influence will be where the flow intensity reaches the minimum. 2. The gravitational analysis. In this technique, theoretical forces of attraction between centers are studied instead of actual flows. It is an important technique to study the potential flows between centers. As per the gravity law, the attraction between two geographical points or areas is directly related to their masses, and inversely related to the distance between them. But the terms masses and distance are very subjective, and it is very difficult to define both the terms, as it might refer to different things to different people and study. For example, mass may be regarded as population or as employment or as income or as retail turnover, whereas the distance may refer to road distance, airline distance or time distance etc. 1.2.1.3 Planning regions in India. Sen-Gupta scheme. P. Sen-Gupta divided the country into 7 major planning regions. The regions are as follows. I-1. The North-Eastern region. 2. The Eastern region. 3. The North-Central region. 4. The Central region. 5. The Northwestern region. 6. The Western region. 7. The Southern region. He took natural regions of the country and state boundaries as a base and used homogeneity, nodality, production, specialization, energy resources utilization for the delineation. Town and Country Planning Organization Scheme. The Town and Country Planning Organization has divided the country into 13 macro regions, which are then divided into 35 mesoregions. The macro regions are as follows. 1. South Peninsular. 2. Central Peninsular. 3. Western Peninsular. 4. Central Deccan. 5. Eastern Peninsular. 6. Gujarat. 7. Western Rajasthan. 8. Aravalli region. 9. Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. 10. Trans-Indo-Gangetic Plains and Hills. 11. Ganga-Yamuna Plains. 12. Lower Ganga Plains. 13. North-Eastern Region. 1.2.1.4 Regional Planning. Regional planning is a strategy for boosting the country's economy. It is a mechanism for assessing the potential of sub-national territories and developing them to the nation's overall advantage. Regional planning is an instrument through which optimal utilization of space and optimal distribution patterns of human activities can achieve. It is both comprehensive and consolidative. Consolidative in the sense that it connects to other types of planning, such as national, sectoral, and village planning, and comprehensive in the sense that it addresses the social, economic, physical, and technological aspects of planning issues. Regional planning is primarily concerned with the functional issues that arrecede the regional level. On the one hand, it focuses on issues that can only be determined for areas much larger than the current local planning authorities' jurisdictions, such as population and employment movement and circulation etc. On the other hand, it deals with inter-regional population and employment flows, resource availability and utilization. The role of regional planning is passive in countries where the size, pattern and the place of investment decisions are determined by sectoral units under the overall supervision of national planning authorities. Because in this manner regional planning is only reduced to an instrument to improve sectoral efficiency of the investment processes. But in those countries where the basic objectives of regional development are incorporated in the national plans, regional planning assumes a more positive and active role. 1.3 Urban and Rural, Village, Settlements. A settlement is a place where people live and interact with each other through various activities. It is basically an occupants unit, comprising of the grouping and arrangement of two basic elements viz., houses and roads. According to Brunchers, 1952, settlement is the topographic expression of the grouping and arrangement of two fundamental elements, houses and highways. Dickon and Pitts said, settlement refers to the grouping of people and houses into hamlets, villages, towns, and cities. According to Rubenstein, J.M., 1990, settlement refers to a permanent occupation of a site by group of individuals. 1.3.1 Urban settlements. 1.3.1.1 At the global level, there is no universal population criterion for the identification of urban areas. In different countries, varying minimum size of population is prescribed and all areas having population greater than this size are termed urban areas. Following are some examples of population criteria used in different countries. 1. Denmark 250 inhabitants. 2. Greenland 300 inhabitants. 3. USA 2500 inhabitants. 4. India 5000 inhabitants. 5. Korea 40,000 inhabitants. Adoption of conglomeration approach alone simplifies matters considerably, but can lead to misleading conclusions. E.g., overgrown villages. United Nations report identified the following 5 main concepts among the definitions used for urban areas. 1. Administrative area. 2. Population size. 3. Local government areas. 4. Urban characteristics. 5. Predominant economic activity. In India, other than the total population, some other demographic parameters are also taken into account while identifying urban areas. As per the Census of India 2011, the definition of urban area is as follows. All places with a municipality, corporation, cantonment board or notified town area committee, etc. All other places which satisfied the following criteria. A minimum population of 5,000. At least 75% of the male main working population engaged in non-agricultural pursuits, and a density of population of at least 400 persons per square km. Number of UAs, towns and outgrowths, OGs. Look at the screen. 1.3.1.2 Size classification of towns in India. The Census of India identifies different classes of urban settlements on the basis of population. Following 6 classes of urban settlements have been identified using the population criterion. Class 1 includes cities with a population above 100,000 people e.g. metropolitan cities. Class 2 to 50,000 to 99,999. Class 3 to 20,000 to 49,999. Class 4 to 10,000 to 19,999. Class 5,000 to 9,999. Class 6 comprises settlements having population less than 5,000 persons. This distribution of urban settlements in different class sizes is mainly used to make comparisons of the evolution of India's demographic structure over time. However, it does not have administrative or governance implications. 1.3.1.3 Functional classification of towns. On the basis of functions, Indian cities and towns can be broadly divided into following categories. Mining towns. These towns have developed in mineral-rich areas such as Dhanbad, Raniganj, Jaria, etc. Industrial towns. Industries is the mainstay of these cities such as Mumbai, Coimbatore, Jamshedpur, Bhilai, etc. Administrative towns and cities. These are towns acting as administrative headquarters such as Chandigarh, New Delhi, Srinagar, Chennai, etc. Transport cities. They may be ports primarily engaged in export and import activities, such as Kandla, Kochi, Kozhikode, Visakhapatnam, etc. Or hubs of inland transport such as Agra, Mughal Sarai, etc. Educational towns. The towns that are hub of education such as Roorkee, Aligarh, Pilani, Allahabad, etc. Commercial towns. Towns and cities that are known for their trade and commerce activities. For example, Kolkata. Cantonment towns. These towns emerged as cantonment towns such as Ambala, Jalandhar, Udhampur, etc. Religious and cultural towns. Towns and cities that rose to prominence as religious centers such as Varanasi, Mathura, Amritsar, Kurukshetra, Haridwar, Ujjain. Tourist towns. Shimla, Pachmahi, Jodhpur, Nainital, Mussoorie, Jaisalmer are some of the tourist destinations. 1.3.2 Rural settlements. Rural settlements refer to cluster of dwellings called villages together with the surrounding land from which the inhabitants derive their sustenance. In other words, any settlement in which most of the people are engaged in primary activities such as agriculture, forestry, mining and fishing can be termed as rural settlement. 1.3.2.1 Types of rural settlement. Its type, shape and pattern are generally influenced and shaped by the number of factors like work typology, the agricultural techniques and soil utilization method. Their character is significantly different from that of urban settlements. Rural settlement can be categorized into following types. 1. Compact settlement. 2. Semi-compact settlement. 3. Dispersed settlement. 4. Hamlet settlements. Compact settlement. In these types of settlements, all the dwellings are concentrated in one central site. The houses are compact and congested with narrow lanes. The size of these settlements depends on nature and resources of the surrounding country. They are usually found in highly productive alluvial plains like Indo-Gangetic plains, plateau region of Malwa etc. Their size varies from 500 to 2,500 persons in sparsely populated parts and above 10,000 persons in the Ganga plain. Semi-compact settlement. If the number of villages equals more than of half of the hamlets, then termed as semi-compact settlement. It is a transitional phase in the growth of compact settlement. It covers more area than the compact settlements. The dwellings are not concentrated at one common site in such settlements. These types of settlements are found in both plateau and plain regions of India. Dispersed settlement. If the number of villages is less than half of hamlet number, it is a dispersed settlement. Dispersed settlements are generally found in hills, mountains, plateaus. The inhabitants of the settlements live in isolated dwellings scattered in the cultivated fields. Their development can be attributed to overpopulation, as partly migration of population often leads to the inhabitation of a dispersed settlement rather than a new village. Homesteads or farmsteads of Punjab, Haryana and western Uttar Pradesh belong to this category of the rural settlements. Hamlet settlements. If the number of villages is equal to half of hamlet number, it is a hamlet settlement. They are just a tiny collection of houses, perhaps centered around few farms and maybe without even a commercial area. These types of settlements are fragmented into several small units. In India, these types of settlements are found in West Bengal, eastern Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh and coastal plains. 1.3.2.2 Pattern of rural settlements. Pattern refers to the geometric form or shape of a settlement. Pattern is also defined as the relationship between one house or building to another. 1. Linear pattern. This is also known as a string or ribbon development. In such settlement pattern, houses are located along some linear physical or cultural feature such as a road, railway line, river, canal etc. Houses are simply arranged along a line or series of lines. Linear pattern is found largely in middle and lower Ganga plain and along the Malabar and Konkan coast. 2. Rectangular pattern. Rectangular patterns of rural settlements normally develop in plain areas or wide inter-mountain valleys where intensive cultivation is practiced. The roads are rectangular and cut each other at right angles. This is a very common type which develops around the rectangular shape of agricultural fields. They are found in Indira Gandhi Canal Command region, the delta of peninsular rivers, coast. 3. Square pattern. This is basically a variant of the rectangular type. Such a pattern is associated with villages lying at the cross-section of roads. They may also be found in those areas where some natural or cultural features restrict the expansion of the village outside a square space. Such patterns are found in Ganga Yamuna Doab and Tamil Nadu etc. 4. Circular pattern. This pattern develops around water bodies like lakes, tanks, and sometimes the village is planned in such a way that the central part remains open and is used for keeping the animals to protect them from wild animals. Examples are Ganga Yamuna Doab and Trans Yamuna districts, Madhya Pradesh and Punjab etc. 5. Radial pattern. In this type, several streets converge on one node or center like important buildings, a center of commercial activity like CBD. Structures are built along these roads and the streets seem to be radiating from a common center. About one-third of the Indian villages have radial pattern. Examples are settlements in northern plains in Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh, etc. 6. T-shaped or Y-shaped pattern. T-shaped settlements develop at tri-junctions of the roads while Y-shaped settlements emerge as the places where two roads converge on the third one and houses are built along these roads. 1.3.2.3 Problems of rural settlement. 1. Rural settlements in developing countries are large in number but lack both physical and social infrastructure. Supply of potable water to rural settlements in underdeveloped and developing countries is not adequate and people in villages have to walk long distances to fetch drinking water. During rainy season, the settlements remain cut off and pose serious difficulties in providing emergency services. Providing adequate health and educational infrastructure for their large rural population is also a huge challenge. 2. Rural areas in most of the countries of South Asia experience natural and man-made disasters like drought and flood. The houses made up of mud, wood and thatch, remain vulnerable to damage during heavy rains and floods, and require proper maintenance every year. Rural development and regional planning are inextricably intertwined in developing countries. Despite rising urbanization, the majority of the population still lives in rural areas and earns a living from agriculture. In absolute terms, the number of people relying on agriculture continues to expand. 1.4 Theories and models. 1.4.1 Economic growth theories. Until the middle of the 20th century, a low level of development and poverty were deemed normal, and not a subject of research to find solutions to ameliorate the condition. Only in the 1950s did the first will-based theories on economic development and underdevelopment emerge. 1.4.2 Dualism and theories of modernization. While Rostow's theory appears to be consistent with the historical experiences of at least some wealthy countries, another visualization, the so-called dualism model, gained popularity in the 1950s and appeared to be better adapted to actual conditions in the developing world. J.H. Burke, 1953, a Dutch economist, is considered the spiritual father of this notion. He and his allies, e.g., Benjamin and Higgins, made a distinction between countries where capitalism is indigenous and highly developed and countries where capitalism is slow to grow. Capitalism in the latter country is not an indigenous creation, but has been imported in full force, affecting only a small segment of society, the top crust, or, in essence, the urban populace. The majority of people, on the other hand, live in rural areas and produce mostly for self-sufficiency. Because of the low productivity, a portion of the harvest is confiscated for rent or tax. Interference from the outside promotes population expansion while preventing structural change. For this condition, Burke coined the term, static expansion. Agriculture's commercialization is hampered by the marker's heterogeneous organization. The application of capitalist concepts to agricultural production does not benefit the rural population. At the same time, they are subjected to the negative impacts of capitalism in other places. Capitalism destroys all types of traditional socialites and institutions, causing villages to revert rather than expand steadily. Economic alternatives to the dualism notion frequently emphasize the widespread lack of job prospects in agriculture, as opposed to the increase of jobs in the modern economy. As a result, the modern sector, i.e. manufacturing for all practical purposes, will be required to drive development, which can only be accomplished through a process of capital accumulation in the modern sector and the absorption of farm labor in industry. Theory of modernization. Many sociologists were influenced by Burke's theories, and they strove to build models that took into account the socio-cultural components of development. The theory of modernization is the name given to their work. Its most prominent proponents, including Regers, Eisentraut, and Deutsch, identified two stages of social variation: development and modernization. Modernization is the process of people transitioning from their conventional ways of life to more complicated, rapidly changing, and technologically sophisticated ways of existence at a specific level. Modernization necessitates the expansion of the communication and transportation networks. Communication and dispersion are viewed as the basic mechanisms in the propagation of development. 1.4.3 Dependency models. As a result of existing inequities between countries, resources are transferred from the most backward and reliant on sectors and countries to the most progressive and dominated. This process not only explains, but also intensifies inequality, turning it into a necessary and fundamental feature of the global economy. Dos Santos, 1969. The core of the so-called dependence theory is this hypothesis. The dependency hypothesis focuses on issues like export dependency, deterioration in trade terms, import substitution, and so on, and explains poverty and stagnation in developing nations through these phenomena. As a result of the availability of cheap local labor and the use of capital-intensive technology, the development economy of the time is marked by significant variations in domestic wage levels. 1.4.4 Distribution and basic needs. According to Edelman, at each stage of economic progress, only those who have access to the most important factor of production, land, capital, and know-how, will prosper. Before taking steps to achieve quick growth, it is necessary to redistribute the central element of production in order to obtain a more equitable distribution of those aids. This may temporarily stifle economic growth, but any shortfalls will be overcome by faster growth in the future. What's more significant, everyone will benefit from this economic expansion, resulting in genuine development. Edelman's vision is perhaps extreme, and unfortunately, the evidence offered of subsequent accelerated growth is scanty at best. Basic needs models. The adoption of a policy to satisfy the basic needs of income and services within one generation of the lowest part of the population in developing nations is presented in the basic needs models, a considerably less radical distribution tactic. It's worth noting that these basic requirements encompass both revenue, i.e., productive employment, and services. The poorest countries, in particular, cannot afford to pay for increased services without corresponding increases in productivity or production. The concerned have stated that the only way to alleviate the poverty problem is to increase the productivity of a growing labor force. Economic development accordingly constitutes a crucial element in the strategy. 1.4.5 The ecological models. In addition to the economic growth and distribution models, the ecological model has been advanced. In this view, man is a part of his surroundings, or ecosystem. According to Wamdam, 1978, affluent countries appear to have applied grossly distorted and simplified kinds of the basic needs approach and ecological notions in a way that best suits their own welfare, both economically and ideologically. Growing population, particularly in rural areas, means more strain on available land resources and, presumably, a higher need to improve non-agricultural employment opportunities. Rural industrialization has, however, been a disappointment in many circumstances. The origins are numerous and may differ from one country to the next. 1.4. 6 Spatial organization and central place theories. Following are some theories and models that attempt to explain the spatial organization of the settlements along with their hierarchy and order. 1.4.6.1 Von Thunen theory. Von Thunen was the first to explain spatial patterns, the isolated state, 1826. In his book he considered the problem of location of various forms of agricultural production in relation to markets. He envisioned that the town provides factory-produced goods and services to its rural neighbors, as well as a market for agrarian extras made in the countryside. In his theory Thunen made certain assumptions. In its initial form, Von Thunen's isolated state had only one significant town. There was only one mode of transportation that did not benefit from economies of scale. He arranged cultivation in a series of concentric circles around the town, and a specific pattern of land use would dominate within each circle. Furthermore, he was more concerned with the association of the surrounding space than with the town. 1.4.6.2 Christoller's central place theory. Christoller propounded central place theory in his study of central places in southern Germany, 1933. He discovered some ordering principles governing the distribution of towns and cities. Settlements and market zones are organized into nested hierarchies in metropolitan areas. His hypothesis is primarily concerned with describing the spatial distribution of service sector events. Marketing is the most important urban function when it comes to the size and distribution of settlements within an urban system. Only linking purposes within settlements are dealt with by Christoller. He based his idea on two concepts. 1. The range of a good, the maximum distance that consumers are willing to travel to buy that good. 2. The threshold for a good, the minimum volume of goods required to support a business. He believed that different items would have changed ranges and thresholds, which would define both the number of institutions in a region with a given population and their circulation, based on the assumption of constant utility for both consumers and shopkeepers. His theory was based upon three principles. 1. Marketing principle K3. In this case, central places are arranged to be as near as possible to the consumers. 2. Transportation principle K4. It is related to distribution of central places for maximizing the distribution of products at the lowest possible cost. To accomplish this, as many central locations as feasible must be situated along the 6 straight paths. 3. Administrative principle K7. In this principle, each center should have control of the 6 surrounding areas with no divided allegiance. 1.4.6.3 Losch Model. Auguste Losch put forward an elaborated and extended Christoffels scheme into a more complex model which is very close to reality. The Losch model starts with nucleated agricultural villages spread out in a triangle pattern across an agrarian plain. A hexagonal basic market area is formed by 6 of these triangles. Different commodities have a different range of support and therefore different numbers of hexagons. The settlement pattern does not always assume a neat hierarchy. Moreover, centers of similar rank may provide a completely distinct specialized function. He doesn't group functions together in orders. He considers each center to have its own range, threshold, and hexagonal hinterland, and it does not have to necessarily include examples of all functions with lower thresholds because higher order centers are not always capable of performing all of the functions of a lower order central location. In comparison to Christoffels' scheme, the pattern of central places proposed by Losch is more intricate. Thus, he improved upon Christoffels' central place theory by bringing it more closer to reality. 1.5 Historical background of cities. 1.5.1 History of towns in the world. The earliest civilizations were seen on the banks of Euphrates and Tigris, Nile, Ganga, Sindhu, Indus, Yamuna, Yangtze and Kiang etc. 1. Sumerian cities. Between 12,000 and 3000 BC, Sumerian towns flourished. The Sumerian city was built to be defensive and small. The structures were built horizontally, allowing them to adjust to the climate. The market was near the center, and dwellings were strewn over the area. The river served as the focal axis for the development, which was symmetrical. Water was also used for transportation. The majority of the dwellings were made of wood. Ziggurats, which may be up to 8 floors tall, dominated the city skylines. 2. Egyptian cities. Because the Nile River was too wide for navigation, Egyptian civilization grew only on one side of the river. The pharaoh's creative ideals and orders built up the settlements, and the people's lives were dedicated to him. Slaves and artisans were needed to build the pyramids. Therefore, the villages were mostly for them. The buildings were composed of sun-dried bricks and the cells, or rooms of the dwellings, were grouped around a shared courtyard. Open drains and pathways were provided by the small lanes. The cities were ringed by walls to protect them from the Nile's floods. The houses were of various sorts and sizes. The most valuable commodities were placed in the town's upper right corner. 3. Greek cities. The Greek towns were physically split into 3 sections, one for the gods, one for governance, and one for living quarters. The city plan was designed to accommodate all 3 kinds of people: artisans, workers, and soldiers. The towns were built to meet the needs of sanitation, defense, and circulation. Greece was ruled by the Macedonians during the Hellenistic period. Many public structures, including as the ODEION, treasury, library, and prison, were constructed during that time period, in addition to agora, baths, and stadia. 4. Roman cities. From the 6th century BC through the 5th century AD, Roman civilization developed. The Romans lacked the Greeks' creativity and built on a large scale. They created a water supply system, a drainage system, and so on. Aqueducts were used to transport water from faraway locations. During this time, public structures such as baths became more built. The Roman towns were mainly divided into three categories. Collonia, which were high-ranking cities having all benefits, were there as hierarchy of plots for people having various social status. Oppidia, towns which were conquered from others. Castrum, military camp towns. 5. Medieval cities. Muslim culture was on the rise by the 7th century AD. Commercial zones grew up near the gates or fortified walls to allow whatever inter-settlement trade was still viable. Near the settlement's center, the religious leadership occupied the highest level of land. The city council, as a symbol of the people, was located near the settlement's geometrical center. The church, or monastery, or castle, or feudal lords, dominated the early towns. It was surrounded by a church square, a market plaza, a town hall, and guild halls. 6. Neoclassic or Renaissance period. The Renaissance began in the mid-14th century and continued until the 17th century. The settlements ranged in population from a few hundred to 500,000 people. Towns were constructed within a day's walking distance of one another, i.e., 20 to 30 miles. There was no sewage disposal infrastructure in place, thus trash was dumped on the streets. Baroque city. George Eugene Haussmann came up with the novel plan of having straight avenues joining the important places. Boulevards were made and some form of building bylaws like height restrictions were introduced. The main features of Baroque planning were as follows. A. Avenues. B. Fountains. C. Access and D. Geometry. In the medieval period, the emphasis was placed on the mass of the buildings, while in the Renaissance period, the emphasis was placed on the space, and in the Baroque period, both mass and space were given equal weight. 7. The Industrial Revolution and development in transportation. Basic changes that took place with the Industrial Revolution that took place in the 18th century Europe were. In 1765 James Watt invented the steam engine by which mechanical power became independent of hand power, which led to an increment of the overall production, trade and development of factories. Gradually there came a change in the economic leadership. Industrialization stained factories which, like magnets, attracted workers that demanded to have dwellings, shops and schools. The steam railroad was created in 1825 to aid in the procurement of raw materials and the distribution of completed goods from one location to another. Cities were the first to implement mass transit, public transportation. Electric railroads were introduced in 1885, and internal combustion engines were developed, both of which contributed to increased city congestion. In Boston, the first underground railways opened in 1897. These diverse advances, together with advancements in air transportation, increased concentration in urban areas. Thus, development of town around factories and the development of factories in town had led to the development of factory towns. 8. The City Beautiful movement in America. In 1893, Chicago hosted a World Fair in response to the negative effect that manufacturers were having on urban life. In contrast to the confined, repetitive, and unsightly cities, a desire for a fair that was large, broad, and beautiful was felt. The strategy was to make no little plans. The blueprints had massive proportions and were of colossal scale. It was a bit of a stretch to call the fair a white city. The event sparked a tidal wave of city planning ideas. Every city planner became a supporter of Daniel Burnham's City Beautiful movement. The designers drew inspiration from the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. However, these activities were not open to the general public, and the plans did not adhere to the human scale. Furthermore, cities became commercial centers. As a result of technological improvements, and economics played a significant role in city planning. As a result, the necessity for realistic men, rather than dreamers, was deemed to be important, as cities have now become a business proposition. light, air, and plot coverage regulations have been in place since the beginning of the 19th century, but restrictions on commercial and industrial structures have only been in place since the beginning of the 20th century. Housing rules were introduced into the Municipal Acts of India. The first Municipal Corporation Act was that of Mumbai of I-888. Non-residential building laws, on the other hand, were only drafted in 1966. The Garden City, 1898. Ebenezer Howard, an ordinary man and a shorthand writer, produced a book called Tomorrow, to draw attention to the need to build new towns in order to combat the industrial hazards that arose after the Industrial Revolution. To have a habitable, sustainable, and healthy city in the urban area, the city should have an ideal size, a certain population, and density, with agricultural lands surrounding the city. Howard believed garden cities should have all of the advantages of both a village and a town. It is a fully functional city with a population of 30.000 people. The town is around 100 acres in size. The town is bypassed by a railroad, which meets the town at a tangent. See, for example, Fig. New. Eel, the Garden City. A Garden City Association was founded in 1899, and the first Garden City of Letchworth, 35 miles from London, opened in 1903. Letchworth. It covered 500 acres and was meant to house 35,000 people, with 3,000 acres of green belt surrounding it. It had a population of roughly 16,000 people and 100 factories by 1947. As a result, Howard's fantasy was gradually crushed by the invasion of people and industries. There was no distinguishing feature between Letchworth and any other city. Welland. The second Garden City started in 1920, having 2,400 acres and was initially made for 4,000 persons. But by 1947, it was also having about 18,000 population and 70 factories. Satellite towns. Raymond Unwin proposed the notion of satellite towns. Sir Barry Parker was commissioned by the Manchester Housing Committee in 1926 to create a satellite garden town, to ease the pressure caused by the city's congested slums. By 1935, Wythenshawe had been built to accommodate 4,000 people. The township of Beacontree came after that. 1.5.2 History of towns in India. The Indus Valley Civilization. The civilization thrived 3000 years BC, according to carbon studies of the bones found in the Indus Valley. The Mahabharat war is said to have destroyed towns like as Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Nasik, Tamluk, and others. Historians argue that the development of wheels, use of metals, understanding of mathematics, usage of money, art of expression and representation, architecture, and planning skills identified Mohenjo-daro and Harappa's distinct cultures. There is no evidence of the existence of any other similar culture from the same age. Knowledge of geometry, angle, rectangle, slope of ramp, circle, helical coil etc. were also known to the people. Circular tubes for drainage and water supply were also in use. Mohenjo-daro. New fortifications were built, and important streets were set out in north-south pattern. Other roads intersected these roads at an acute angle, and the streets within the built-up regions were narrow, making it difficult to distinguish between different groups. The city was divided into three distinct groups or divisions. A. The religious, institutional and cultural areas around Monastery and Great Bath. J. The western part including the temple. B. The northern part was principally for the production of agriculture and industries. C. The southern part principally for the administration, trade and commerce at the meeting of the East Road and the First Street near the palace. The Buddhist period. This time period relates to Europe's Greek period. The popularity of Hindu thought was waning, and a new ideology emerged that placed a premium on the construction of Buddhist prayer halls and stupas. Alexander the Great. invaded India in the 4th century BC, and a commercial relationship between the Greeks and the Indians evolved as a result. A magnificent school of painting called the Gandhara school arose, with Greek influences and Indian content. Following then, two notable reigns contributed to the grandeur of Indian culture. The first of these was the Mauryan period, which lasted from 324 to 187 BC. This was followed by an era of political instability of 500 years, after which the golden age of Guptas came into rule from 320 AD to 520 AD.
The Mauryan period. During this period, Arthashastra was written by Chanakya and contains discourses on a variety of topics, including government duties, administration, town and country planning, and housing. Some interesting extracts from Arthashastra is given hereunder. Towns should not have surplus population. Extra populations should be shifted to new areas to make new settlements. The towns should be located in such a way that they can help one another at the time of danger. There was also a system of tax relaxation for a few years for the people who come to stay in a new town. Markets were proposed to be placed at highways and road crossings to improve commerce. The new towns should have a higher proportion of agriculturists and Shudras. Dams should be constructed, temples should be provided, and arrangements should be made to look after the aged, children and infirm persons. The Gupta period. During the Gupta dynasty, Buddhism went out of favor, and Hinduism resurfaced. The Golden Age of India is considered to be the reign of Samudragupta and Chandragupta, commonly known as Vikramaditya. This time relates to the Western Roman period. Cities like Ujjain, Pataliputra, Mathura and Sharavati became great centers of learning and culture. During this time, the Ajanta and Ellora caves were built, as was the iron pillar near the Qutub Minar in Delhi, which was built by Kumar Gupta in the 5th century AD. Vastashastra. There are some detailed treatises on ancient Indian urban planning. It was most likely written in the 6th century AD. There are various chapters on city planning and building restrictions, as well as connections between them. It's some kind of astrology. There are 8 main sorts of towns and villages based on their shapes, according to it: Dandaka, Nandavartiya, Sarvatobhadra, and Prastara, Swastika, Chaturmukha, and Padmaka. India during the medieval period. During post-Gupta period from AD 600 to about AD 1000, northern India saw a decline in urban growth. Later on, the invasion of Turks followed by the Sultanate period helped in revival of urban development in India. This phase started around 11th century AD and continued with some changes till of the Mughal Empire. The cities which grew and flourished during this period are Ludhiana, Hisar, Jaipur, Agra, Kota, Indore, Ahmedabad, Hyderabad, Mysore, and Vijayanagar, etc.
That of Vijayanagar was founded in the 14th century. Temples, castles, and gardens abound in Vijayanagar town. The ruins of Hampi bear witness to the kingdom's greatness, with a population of more than 5 lakhs and thriving commercial activity such as selling jewelry and precious stones. The Renaissance period. The Mughal Empire in India coincides to Europe's Renaissance period. The Mughal period was characterized by pomp and splendor, as well as a distinct architectural style that peaked during Shah Jahan's reign. During the Mughal era, just a few towns were planned and built. Fatehpur was built in Sikri by Emperor Akbar, but it failed because later it was discovered that there was a severe lack of drinking water there, and the town's geographical location was not safe enough politically. Maharaja Jaisingh laid the foundation stone for the city of Jaipur in 1753, 6 years after laying the foundation stone, on a meticulously planned plan with vast avenues and public buildings. Savai Ram Singh established all of Jaipur's prominent institutions and gave the city its ubiquitous pink color. Jaipur used to have well-kept roadways with geometric perfection and architectural accuracy, as well as symmetrical open squares and fountains surrounded by homogeneous structures. Modern towns. Several towns and cities, particularly the port towns in India, owe their origin and development to the British and other Europeans, and Surat, Daman, Goa, Pondicherry, etc. are few of the examples. The creation of three metropolitan cities like Mumbai, Bombay, Chennai, Madras, and Kolkata, Calcutta, was the main contribution of the British in India. They also established administrative centers, hill towns, and introduced cantonment towns and civil lines. Several industrial towns and sites like Jamshedpur were also developed during the British period in India. Post-independence, after the independence, for the economic development of the country, new towns and cities were established by the central and state governments. Many new capital cities were created like Chandigarh, Gandhinagar, Itanagar, Dispur, and Bhubaneswar, etc. The growth of iron and steel industry gave birth to new towns like Durgapur, Rourkela, Bhilai and Bokaro, Visakhapatnam and Vijayanagar, etc. Small and medium-sized towns and cities were developed in all parts of the country. Several old towns have grown as satellite towns like Ghaziabad, Noida, Faridabad, Sonipat, Gurgaon, Bahadurgarh, etc. 1.6 Summary. The concept of region and planning. Region are useful to study and resolve the issue of economic disparities, but it faces some difficulties in actual delineation. Problems arise when attempts are made to delineate. Regions are delineated by taking into account more than one feature, especially if they are incommensurable. Perhaps the greatest difficulty, as far as considerations of regional planning are concerned, is that state boundaries do not correspond to economic regions of the country. At the meso level, both the urban and rural issues can be dealt with through regional planning. Thank you. We will see you with the next chapter.